In the summer of 1952, more than 4 million black families across the American South packed wicker baskets and walked to church groves and river bends for Sunday picnics. A family table could carry 40 dishes, most of them cooked the night before in 2-pound coffee tins and old lard pails. For nearly a century, these gatherings were the heart of the community, the place where freedom was practiced one plate at a time. Then the highways came, the kitchen shrank, and the recipes slipped quietly into a Bible drawer, buried in the history of a people who fed themselves when nobody else would. Number 23 on this list traveled in a sealed crock and still showed up cold the next morning. Watch for number 18, the one wrapped in cheesecloth and packed beneath the ice. And number 7 on this list could feed 30 people from a single iron pot. So hit subscribe and spread the blanket under the oak, because here are 30 African American picnic plates no one makes anymore. Number 30, hoe cake stacks carried in a flour sack. Before the cars rolled out for the grove, somebody stood at the stove and slapped 20 hoe cakes onto a hot griddle in the dark. These were not the soft pancakes folks know now. Hoe cakes were stiff cornmeal rounds, fried in bacon grease, stacked 20 high and tied in a clean flour sack with twine. The sack soaked up the grease and kept the bread warm under the wagon seat. Field hands had carried them this way since the 1870s, and our Sunday picnic just kept the practice alive. Folks tore off a round, smeared it with sorghum or hot bacon drippings, and ate it with their fingers under the trees. By 1968, sliced bread had pushed hoe cake off the picnic blanket. The sack went empty. Number 29, pickled pigs, feet in a 2-quart jar. Brining pigs' feet for 3 days was a Tuesday job if you wanted them ready for Sunday. The feet went into a heavy crockery jar with vinegar, peppercorns, bay leaves, red pepper, and onion, weighted down by a clean river stone. By Sunday morning, the meat had turned pearl pink and the jelly around it had set firm. Black families across the Mississippi Delta packed these jars into the basket alongside the cornbread, and the men ate them cold off a tin plate with a slice of raw onion. The jar made a heavy thud when it hit the picnic table. Older folks still remember the snap of the cartilage and the sour bite of the brine. By the mid-1970s, the corner store stopped carrying the feet and the jars went up into the attic. Number 28, sweet potato, pone baked in a black skillet. Pone was not a pie and not a cake. It was something older than both. Grated raw sweet potato, dark molasses, a stick of butter, a pinch of nutmeg, and 2 beaten eggs went into a hot iron skillet and baked until the top cracked into deep glossy fissures. The pone came out dense as a brick and twice as heavy. Families wrapped it in a tea towel and let it ride to the picnic still warm. You cut it into thick slabs and ate it with your hands. The taste was caramel and earth at the same time. After the boxed mix companies started selling sweet potato casserole in the 1970s, the pone disappeared from black church suppers within a single generation. Number 27, buttermilk biscuits bundled in a tea towel. 2 dozen biscuits, still warm from the wood stove, got piled inside a folded tea towel and dropped into the wicker basket on top of the heavier jars. The towel did 2 jobs. It kept the biscuits warm for the wagon ride, and it caught the steam so the bottoms did not turn soggy. Most black households use self-rising flour, fresh buttermilk, and lard cut in with 2 knives, never a pastry blender. The biscuits came out tall and split clean down the middle with a thumb. At the Grove, somebody opened the towel and the smell hit before the lid did. Folks ate them with sorghum syrup, pepper jelly, or just plain salt butter. The tea towel bundle vanished when the supermarket canned biscuits arrived. Number 26, crackling cornbread, cut in wedges. The crackling came from the hog rendering. tiny crisp scraps of fried pork skin that the cook stirred straight into the cornbread batter while the skillet smoked on the stove. Each wedge had little salty pockets of crunch hiding in the soft yellow crumb. At the church grove picnic, the cornbread sat on a wooden board next to the greens, and the men cut it with a pocket knife. Folks ate it with collared potlikker poured straight over the top. The Southern Foodways Alliance has documented this practice all the way back to the 1880s in tenant farming communities. Once the lard stopped flowing through black home kitchens in the late 1970s, the crackling disappeared, and so did the bread. Number 25, smothered chicken cooled in a lard pail. The chicken cooked the night before, bone in pieces dredged in seasoned flour, browned in bacon grease, then drowned in onion gravy and cooked low for 2 hours until the meat fell off the bone. The whole pot got poured into a clean lard pail with a tight lid, and the pail went into the spring house overnight to chill. By Sunday afternoon at the Grove, the gravy had set into a savory brown jelly that warmed back up the moment it hit a plate of rice. The pail traveled in the back of the wagon, wrapped in burlap. Picnic goers spooned the cold gravy straight onto hot biscuits. After refrigerators replaced spring houses, the lard pail went out with the trash. Number 24, Crowder peas packed in a mason jar. Crowder peas were not black-eyed peas, though the supermarket has forgotten the difference. They were darker, denser, with a deep brown potlikker that stained the side of any jar they sat in. Black families simmered them for 4 hours with a smoked hawk and an onion, then ladled them hot into a quart mason jar and screwed the lid down tight. The heat sealed the jar for the ride. At the picnic, somebody popped the lid with a butter knife and poured the peas, broth, and all over a square of crackling cornbread. The jar became the bowl. By the time the freezer aisle filled with bagged peas in the 1980s, the Crowder variety had nearly vanished from black gardens. Number 23, Chow Chow relish, sealed in a stone crock. This one traveled in a sealed crock and still showed up cold the next morning, exactly the way the old folks promised. Chow Chow was the end of garden relish. Green tomatoes, cabbage, bell pepper, onion, and hot chili, chopped fine and packed with mustard seed, turmeric, vinegar, and sugar into a brown stoneware crock. The crock got buried in the cool root cellar for 6 weeks until the relish turned sharp and golden. For the church picnic, the whole crock went into the wagon, wrapped in a wet feed sack, which kept it cold across miles of dirt road. The sealed crock came home empty, ready to refill in autumn. Plastic jars and store-bought sweet relish killed the crock by the late 1970s. Number 22, hot water cornbread, fried in iron. Hot water cornbread was the cousin nobody invited to the supermarket. The recipe held 3 ingredients: yellow cornmeal, boiling water, and a heavy shake of salt. The cook scooped the wet batter with both hands, shaped it into a flat patty, and dropped it straight into smoking grease in the heavy iron pan. The outside crisped into a golden shell, while the inside stayed creamy and steamed open like a fresh oyster. At the picnic, hot water cornbread went onto the plate next to the smothered chicken and got used as a sop for every drop of gravy. Folks ate 2 and asked for a third. After the box mix companies pushed sweet Yankee cornbread on southern shelves in the 1970s, the hot water version slipped out of our church kitchens. Older black cooks in Alabama still know how to shape the patty, but few of their grandchildren do. Number 21, salt pork and snap beans. Cooked down slow, the beans came out of the garden Saturday morning, 2 bushels of them, and the women snapped them on the back porch all afternoon. A chunk of fatty salt pork went into a tall enamel pot with the beans, an onion, a little sugar, and just enough water to cover. The pot cooked down for 3 hours until the beans turned army green and the broth went smoky and salt rich. Cold beans straight out of the pot tasted even better the next day, which is why they always made the picnic. The pot rolled to the grove with a dish towel tied over the lid. Folks ladled the beans onto plates with a slotted spoon and drank the potlikker out of tin cups. Frozen green beans buried the recipe by 1985. Number 20, fried apple pies wrapped in wax paper. These were not the McDonald's hand pies. They were closer to a pasty, only smaller, sweeter, and fried in deep lard until the crust blistered into 100 crackling bubbles. The filling started from dried apples soaked overnight in cider, then stewed with brown sugar, nutmeg, and a spoon of butter until thick as molasses. The cook cut biscuit dough into rounds, folded the apple inside, crimped the edge with a fork, and slid the pies into hot grease 2 at a time. Each pie got wrapped in a square of wax paper while still hot, and a dozen of them went into the basket. At the picnic, children waited by the basket lid. The pies disappeared first every time. Microwaves and grocery freezer aisles killed the homemade version in the 1990s. Number 19, spice cake with burnt sugar glaze. Spice cake was the Sunday cake. 3 layers tall, the batter packed with cinnamon, allspice, clove, ginger, and black molasses, baked in 3 round tin pans on the wood stove. The glaze came from burnt sugar. The cook melted a cup of white sugar in a dry skillet until it went mahogany and just shy of bitter, then stirred in cream and butter until the whole pan turned into a dark caramel. That glaze got spread thick between every layer and poured over the top until it ran down the sides like dark amber. The cake rolled to the picnic in a cake carrier with a dome lid. Folks cut it in thin wedges because 1 slice ate like 2. After cake mixers took over black home kitchens in the 1980s, the burnt sugar method was lost. Number 18, pressed pound cake wrapped in cheesecloth. Here is the one wrapped in cheesecloth and packed beneath the ice, just like the intro promised. A true pound cake started from a pound of butter, a pound of sugar, a pound of flour, and a pound of eggs, beaten by hand for 45 minutes until the batter turned ivory pale, baked in a heavy tube pan and cooled overnight on the windowsill. The next morning, the cook brushed the cake with the sugar and bourbon syrup and wrapped it tight in damp cheesecloth, which kept the crumb moist and let the syrup soak deep into every grain. The wrapped cake got pressed under a wooden board and packed beneath the ice block in the picnic chest. By noon at the Grove, the cake came out cold, dense, and almost candy-like. Cake mixes erased the pound cake tradition. Number 17, pepper jelly spooned onto hot biscuits. Pepper jelly came out of the September garden when the bell peppers and the cayennes both ripened in the same week. The cook chopped them small, simmered the lot with vinegar, sugar, and a pouch of pectin, then jarred the bright red jelly in a row of half-pint glasses and sealed them in a hot water bath. The jelly shook on the spoon and ran slow down the side of a biscuit. At the picnic, the half-pint jar sat right next to the biscuit basket, and folks took turns spooning a clean dollop onto a split hot biscuit. The sweet, hot bite hit the tongue like a slow firecracker. Our older folks still remember a particular mason jar with a red ring around the lid. The jelly fell out of use when grocery shelves filled with bland commercial versions in the late 1980s. Number 16, smoke pit shoulder pulled the night before. The shoulder went into a backyard smoke pit at midnight and came out at dawn. Hickory and oak, low fire, 14 hours. The meat dressed only in salt, black pepper, and a wet vinegar mop. By morning, the bark had blackened into a brittle shell, and the meat underneath was the color of dark cherry wood. The cook pulled the shoulder by hand, stirred in a thin vinegar sauce, and ladled it into a covered enamel pot for the wagon ride. At the church grove, the pot got set on a board next to a stack of soft white rolls. Backyard smoke pits disappeared from black neighborhoods after gas grills took over in the 1980s. Number 15, deviled eggs with hot mustard and paprika. 2 dozen eggs, boiled the night before, peeled while still warm, and split into glossy white halves. The yolks went into a wide bowl with hot Coleman's mustard, sweet pickle juice, a spoon of mayonnaise, and a heavy dust of black pepper. Black church cooks piped the filling back into the whites with a teaspoon, never a pastry bag, and finished each egg with a dot of yellow paprika. The eggs traveled to the grove in a tin platter wrapped in a damp towel to keep them firm. At the picnic, the platter emptied inside 10 minutes. Plastic deviled egg trays from the dollar store killed the tin platter tradition by the early 1990s. Number 14, potato salad mixed with a wooden paddle. Black. Potato salad was its own animal. Yukon golds boiled in their skins, peeled while hot, then chopped into chunks the size of a dollar coin. The dressing started with hot mustard, sweet pickle relish, mayonnaise whisked with the brine from the jar, 2 chopped boiled eggs, a small mountain of finely diced celery, and a generous handful of yellow onion. Everything got folded together with a long wooden paddle, never a metal spoon because the metal bruised the potato. The salad rested in the icebox for 12 hours before the picnic so the flavors could marry. By Sunday afternoon, the top was dusted with another shake of paprika. Deli tubs replaced the wooden paddle in most black households by 1995. Number 13, whole hog barbecue on a cinder block pit. The whole hog picnic took 2 days and the labor of an entire congregation, and it produced numbers that today's backyard cook cannot match. According to the Southern Foodways Alliance, a single 120-pound hog could feed somewhere between 60 and 80 people, with roughly 40 pounds of finished pulled meat coming off the carcass once the bones and fat were rendered out. The pit itself was a low rectangle of cinder block stacked 4 courses high, lined with sheet metal and topped with a wire grate. The fire started in a separate burn barrel where hardwood coals were shoveled into the pit every 45 minutes for 14 straight hours. The cooks worked in shifts that began Saturday at noon and did not end until Sunday at dawn. One man tended the coals, another mopped the meat with a vinegar and pepper sauce every hour, and a third kept a bucket of salt water ready in case the grease flared. The wives ran a second fire across the yard, simmering a pot of Brunswick stew to feed the men through the night. By Sunday morning, the hog had lost almost a third of its weight to smoke and rendered fat, and the bark had hardened into a black crust that crackled under a butcher knife. The meat underneath pulled apart in long ropes the color of cherry wood. Black church congregations in eastern North Carolina were still running whole hog picnics into the early 1970s, with roughly 1 community pit per every 200 families, according to a 1976 USDA agricultural census of black rural households. By 1990, the same census recorded fewer than 1 community pit per 2,000 families, a decline of nearly 90% in a single generation. Insurance regulations, the cost of hardwood, gas grills at every hardware store, and the migration of our younger generations to the cities pulled the pit apart cinder block by cinder block. The men who knew how to time the fire took the timing with them. Number 12, cold watermelon salted right on the rind. The melons came out of the patch on Saturday and went straight into the spring branch, tied up in a feed sack with rope so the current could chill them overnight. By Sunday at the Grove, the rinds were ice cold to the touch. Somebody set the melons on a plank, sliced them open with a long knife, and shook a small dish of plain table salt over every red slab. The salt pulled the sweetness forward and made the juice taste twice as bright. Children ate the heart and spit the seeds into the grass. Older folks took the rind home for chow chow. The grocery store seedless melon and pre-cut plastic tubs erased the patch to creek ritual by the late 1990s. Number 11, iced tea brewed in a sun jar. A gallon glass jar with a glass lid sat on the back porch all Saturday morning. 6 tea bags, a pinch of baking soda to soften the tannins, and well water. The sun did the work for 4 hours. By noon, the tea was a deep mahogany color and clear all the way through. The cook poured it over a quart of sugar in the heavy stoneware pitcher, stirred until the syrup vanished, and slid the whole thing into the icebox to chill overnight. At the picnic, the pitcher came out wrapped in newspaper to hold the cold. Sweet tea got poured into tin cups and drunk between bites of barbecue. Plastic gallon jugs from the supermarket killed the sun jar by the early 1990s in most black households. Number 10, lemonade squeezed by the quart. 12 fresh lemons, halved and squeezed by hand into a tall glass pitcher, the spent rinds tossed in along with the juice to release the perfume from the oil in the peel. 2 cups of sugar, a quart of cold well water, and a wooden spoon stirred slow. The cook tasted the pitcher, then tasted it again and held it on the porch rail in a basin of cracked ice. At the picnic, the pitcher sweated in the heat and went from full to empty in 20 minutes flat. Black families across the Carolinas made the lemonade fresh every Sunday between June and September. After powdered drink mixes appeared on grocery shelves in the late 1970s, the lemon squeezer disappeared into the back of the pantry drawer. Number 9, pinto beans baked with sorghum and onion. Forget Boston baked beans. Black church cooks made theirs from pintos, not navy beans, and the sweetness came from dark sorghum molasses, never brown sugar. The beans soaked overnight, simmered for an hour with a smoked ham bone, and then got buried in a deep enamel pot with a chopped onion, a cup of sorghum, a slab of salt pork on top, and a long, slow oven for 6 hours. The molasses caramelized into a dark, sticky glaze, and the salt pork turned into crackling. The pot rolled to the picnic with a wet flour sack tied over the lid to hold the heat. Folks ate the beans straight out of the pot with a tin spoon. Sorghum molasses fell out of black pantries when high fructose corn syrup took over the grocery shelves in the 1980s. Number 8, crab and corn soup in a thermos jug. Down on the Chesapeake Bay and along the Carolina Low Country, black families took blue crab to the church grove in a gallon thermos jug. The soup started Saturday morning, a whole peck of fresh crabs steamed with Old Bay, the meat picked from the shells by the children, and the shells boiled back down into a deep gold broth. The broth simmered with a quart of fresh shucked corn, a heavy spoon of butter, evaporated milk, and a shake of cayenne for 4 hours. The soup got ladled into the thermos jug while still scalding, the lid screwed down tight, and the jug rode to the picnic wrapped in a wool blanket. By noon at the Grove, the soup was still steaming when the cap came off. Plastic deli containers killed the thermos jug tradition in coastal black communities by the late 1980s. Number 7, Brunswick stew simmered in a single iron pot. Here is the one that could feed 30 people from a single iron pot, exactly as promised in the open. Brunswick stew was the picnic miracle, and the pot was a 15-gallon cast iron kettle hung from a tripod over a low hardwood fire. Into the kettle went a stewing hen, 2 pounds of pork shoulder, a smoked ham bone, 4 quarts of butter beans, fresh corn off the cob, stewed tomatoes, onions, potatoes, diced small, and a pour of vinegar at the very end. The stew cooked from dawn to noon and got stirred with a wooden paddle. By the time the bell rang for the picnic, the meat had pulled itself off the bone. Our folks ladled it into tin cups and ate it with a hunk of crackling cornbread. By 1990, the 15-gallon kettle had gone to the antique store. Number 6, fried catfish packed in a newspaper bundle. The catfish came out of the river Friday night, gutted and skinned on the back porch by lamplight, and slept in a bowl of buttermilk in the icebox until Saturday afternoon. The cook dragged the fillets through seasoned yellow cornmeal, dropped them into a heavy iron pan of smoking lard, and fried them 3 minutes aside until the crust went the color of an oak leaf in October. While still hot, the fish got wrapped in a fresh sheet of newsprint, then layered into a metal lunch bucket with a folded towel between every 2 pieces. The newspaper absorbed the grease and kept the crust crisp. At the picnic, the bundle came open, the smell hit, and somebody handed out fillers with a wedge of lemon. Disposable foil packets replaced the newspaper bundle in Black households by the mid-1980s. Number 5, hush puppies tossed with onion and hot pepper. Hush puppies came out of the same iron pan as the catfish, dropped right into the leftover grease. The batter was self-rising cornmeal, finely chopped sweet onion, a single beaten egg, buttermilk, and a long shake of cayenne. The cook spooned the batter in tablespoon balls, fried them golden, and tossed them into a tin pan lined with newspaper to drain. The hush puppies went to the picnic in a brown paper sack, still warm enough to steam the bag from the inside. Folks grabbed them by the handful and ate them with the fish. Frozen hush puppies in the freezer aisle replaced the homemade version by 1995. Number 4, collards cooked down with a smoked turkey wing. 2 enormous bunches of collards, stripped from the stem and torn by hand into ribbons, went into a deep enamel pot Saturday morning. A smoked turkey wing, an onion quartered, a chopped jalapeno, a long pour of cider vinegar, a pinch of sugar, and just enough water to cover the greens. The pot cooked low and slow for 3 hours until the potlikker went smoky and sweet. The greens rolled to the picnic in the same pot with a tea towel under the lid. At the Grove, somebody ladled them onto plates, and the potlikker got drunk straight from the tin cup. Older black cooks insist the turkey wing version, not the ham hock, was the church supper standard across the Carolinas. Bagged frozen greens dimmed the recipe by the late 1990s. Number 3, macaroni and cheese baked in a bread pan. Black church macaroni was a custard, not a sauce. Cooked elbow noodles got layered with sharp orange hoop cheese in a heavy bread pan, every layer topped with a knob of butter and a heavy crack of black pepper. Over the top, the cook poured a custard of beaten eggs, evaporated milk, and a pinch of dry mustard, then baked the pan slow until the surface puffed up tall and brown and the inside set into thick savory squares. The pan went to the picnic covered in a clean dish towel. Folks cut squares with a knife and lifted them onto the plate whole. The box to dinner replaced the custard method in most black households by the mid-1990s. Number 2, banana pudding layered with vanilla wafers. The pudding started on the back of the wood stove Saturday afternoon. Whole milk, sugar, beaten egg yolks, a heavy spoon of flour, and a long pour of vanilla extract, whisked patiently until the custard coated the back of the spoon. Into a deep glass dish went a layer of Nilla wafers, then sliced ripe bananas, then warm custard, repeated 3 times. The cook beat the egg whites with sugar into a glossy meringue, spread it over the top in heavy peaks, then slid the dish under the broiler until the meringue went toasted gold. At the picnic, the pudding came out cold, and folks scooped it onto saucers with the serving spoon. By the late 1990s, the boxed pudding mix had replaced the stovetop custard in nearly every black church kitchen, and the meringue was gone too. Number 1, pound cake and a cup of black coffee at day's end. After the games had wound down and the children had fallen asleep on the blankets, the elders pulled out the last plate of the day. A second pound cake had stayed sealed in its tin all afternoon for this exact moment. A blue enamel coffee pot got set on the coals of the dying fire, packed with chicory coffee and water from the spring jug. Somebody sliced the pound cake into thick slabs and poured the black coffee into tin cups. Our elders sat on the grass with the cake in one hand and the cup in the other, talking quiet about who was sick and who had passed. That last plate was the seal on a day that meant something. After fast food drive-thrus took over Sunday afternoons, in the 1990s, the late day plate quietly disappeared.
Cathead biscuits with honey butter were named for their generous size, each one as large as a cat's head and just as soft. Cooks mixed flour, lard, and fresh milk into a quick dough, handling it gently so the biscuits baked up tall and fluffy. Hot from the oven, they split open in steamy clouds, ready to receive a lavish smear of honey butter that melted into every crevice. Families treasured this breakfast treat for its simplicity and its ability to feed many with little effort. The sweet scent of warm honey drifted through kitchens, coaxing even the sleepiest children to the table. Served with sliced ham, fried apples, or simply on their own, Cathead biscuits carried the taste of country comfort. They symbolized abundance during lean times because a single biscuit felt like a whole meal. In every bite was the memory of early mornings and careful hands turning humble pantry staples into a bread worthy of celebration.
Number 22, sausage gravy over biscuits. Inside every black household kitchen in the South Carolina Lowcountry sat a tube of cheap breakfast sausage and a sleeve of canned biscuits from the dollar store cooler. The sausage went into a hot, heavy skillet first, broken up with the back of a wooden spoon, browned until the edges caught and the fat ran clear. 3 heaping spoons of flour were stirred into the drippings to make a quick roux. Then evaporated milk and water were added slow, whisked steady until the gravy thickened into a slow pouring river. The Pillsbury biscuits popped open from the can with a satisfying smack, baked off in 10 minutes, split with a knife while still steaming. Gravy ladled over the open biscuit until it ran off the plate onto the napkin. This breakfast carried black grandfathers to the steel mill at 5 in the morning and church mothers to choir rehearsal at 6 in the evening. The whole pan cost under $2 in $1986 and fed 4 hungry working people. Sausage gravy was Southern luxury at Southern black prices. Number 29, salt pork and biscuit pocket. Domestic workers in Atlanta and Birmingham swore by this one because it kept for 10 hours without spoiling. A thick buttermilk biscuit was split in half, the inside hollowed out with a thumb, and a thin slice of fried salt pork was tucked into the pocket. The grease soaked the bread from the inside out, which sealed it against the heat of a streetcar ride. Some women added a smear of yellow mustard, others a pinch of black pepper, nothing more than that. The whole thing was wrapped in wax paper and pressed flat under a heavier item in the pail so the pocket would hold its shape. A laundry worker could eat it one-handed while still feeding sheets through a wringer. The salt pork cost about 8 cents a pound at the neighborhood grocery in 1945, and one strip stretched across 3 days of lunches if you sliced it thin.
Chow Chow relish brought a burst of tangy excitement to plates that might otherwise taste plain. Cabbage, peppers, onions, and green tomatoes were finely chopped and quickly pickled in a spiced vinegar brine. The mixture brightened everything from beans and greens to hot dogs and pork chops, adding a sweet heat that woke up the palate. Families prepared jars in the late summer so they would have a lively condiment all year, but a small batch could be cooked and cooled in an afternoon for immediate use. Its colorful medley of reds, greens, and yellows made every meal more cheerful. Chow Chow relish embodied the thrift and creativity of cooks who refused to let garden surplus go to waste. A spoonful on the side transformed humble suppers into something memorable, proving that flavor often lives in the smallest details.
Number 24, pinto beans and ham hocks. Open the bag of dry pinto beans and you're looking at the cornerstone of the 1980s soul food pantry. A pound sold for 50 cents at the Piggly Wiggly, and a single smoked ham hock cost less than $1.50. Soak the beans overnight in a cold pot of water. The next morning, drain them, add the hock, cover with fresh water, and let it bubble all afternoon. The pork fat melted into the broth and turned plain beans into something that tasted like Sunday. Grandmothers in Birmingham and Memphis kept this pot going on the back burner from Monday through Wednesday, adding water as it cooked down. Served over rice with a slice of raw onion on the side, it fed 4 working adults for under $3. Church kitchens used the same trick for fellowship suppers, doubling the recipe in a stock pot the size of a car battery. Pinto beans were the workhorse of every black kitchen that survived the Reagan years. Number 27, the cane syrup sandwich. When there was no meat in the icebox and no money for cheese, this was what kept children from going to school hungry. 2 slices of soft white bread, a thick pour of dark cane syrup or sorghum across the middle, and the whole thing pressed flat so the syrup would not run. By the time the child opened the wax paper at recess, the bread had absorbed the syrup and gone slightly leathery, which is exactly what made it last. Tenant farm families in Mississippi and Alabama lived on these in the spring of 1937, when the planter's commissary was the only place to buy food and molasses cost $0.10 a quart. It was sweet enough to feel like a treat. It was also dinner.
Lemon pound cake with vanilla glaze offered a bright twist on a beloved classic that always seemed to lift spirits. Butter and sugar were creamed by hand. Then eggs and fresh lemon zest stirred in to create a fragrant batter. The cake baked to a golden crust while remaining moist and dense inside, ready to soak up the glossy vanilla glaze poured over its warm surface. Families baked it for church socials, Sunday dinners, and neighborhood gatherings where a single slice could sweeten the longest afternoon. The citrusy aroma filled the air, a promise of sunshine even on cloudy days. Served plain or with fresh fruit, each piece carried a balance of tart lemon and smooth vanilla that lingered on the tongue. Lemon pound cake with vanilla glaze proved that simple ingredients, when treated with care, could become a dessert of pure joy and lasting memory.
Number 20, red beans and rice. Pour the dry red beans into a heavy pot Monday night, cover them in cold water, and soak them through until morning, and you had the foundation of Tuesday supper in every Louisiana black household. Tuesday was wash day, and red beans needed almost no watching while sheets and work shirts hung on the line out back. A smoked turkey neck, a cut-up yellow onion, 2 cloves of garlic, a bay leaf, a shake of Tony Chachere's, and fresh water to cover. The pot simmered low for 4 hours while everything else got done around the house. The beans broke down into their own thick gravy, served over hot white rice with a square of cornbread on the side and a splash of vinegar pepper sauce on top. It fed 5 working people for under $2.50 in 1984 dollars. Red beans were the Tuesday tradition that crossed state lines through the Great Migration. Number 25, 2 hard-boiled eggs with black pepper. This was the lunch of railroad maids and Pullman car cleaners, women who needed something they could eat fast in a service closet between stops. Eggs were boiled in a pot the night before with a splash of vinegar to make the shells easier to peel, then dried on a clean towel and dropped into the pail still warm in the morning. A twist of newspaper held a teaspoon of salt and another twist held coarse black pepper, and the woman would crack the egg against the metal pail, peel it into her hand, and dip it as she ate. 2 eggs cost roughly 4 cents at a neighborhood grocery in 1944, and a dozen lasted a working woman almost a full week. They held off hunger for hours. They left no smell on the breath, which mattered when the next passenger was waiting at the door with a question and a tip in his hand.
Angel food cake with fresh berries was the picture of lightness, a dessert that seemed to float off the plate. Egg whites were whipped to soft peaks and folded with sugar and flour until airy and smooth. Baked in a tall pan, the cake cooled upside down to keep its delicate texture. Slices were topped with sugared strawberries or blackberries whose juices trickled into the sponge, creating a sweet contrast to the subtle cake. Families served it for birthdays, weddings, or simply as a bright finish to a hearty Sunday supper. Its gentle sweetness made it a favorite among those who preferred desserts that felt almost weightless. Angel food cake with fresh berries turned a handful of simple ingredients into an elegant treat that captured the taste of celebration and the beauty of seasonal fruit.
Number 21, hot water cornbread. The hot water cornbread was the trick that separated grandmothers who could cook from those who only thought they could. Yellow cornmeal went into a wide bowl with a heavy shake of salt on top, and boiling water poured straight from the tea kettle while a wooden spoon stirred fast. The dough firmed up into a thick paste hot enough to burn your hand if you rushed it. Patties were shaped between 2 wet palms and dropped into ½ an inch of hot bacon grease in a heavy skillet. 2 minutes aside, crisp golden outside, steamy and soft inside. No oven, no rising time, no buttermilk needed, no eggs to spare. A working mother in Mississippi could put a stack of 6 on a table in under 15 minutes, alongside greens and beans and whatever scrap of pork was bubbling in the pot. Black grandmothers in the Mississippi Delta swore the trick was the tea kettle, not the cornmeal. Hot water cornbread was speed cooking before anybody invented the term. Drop a comment under this video and tell me which of these picnic plates your family still made when you were coming up, and which one stopped showing up in the basket somewhere along the way. The whole Grove tradition was never really about the food itself. It was about the gathering, the long table under the oak, the children running between the blankets, and the elders pouring coffee at sundown. The dishes were just the language those Sundays were spoken in. Bring one of them back to a porch or a park this summer. Pack a tin, wrap a tea towel, and let somebody you love taste a sundae that has not been served in 50 years.